Kentucky. It's a Saturday, right? And I'm outside enjoying this beautiful weather while we're self-quarantining. At least we can get outside. So I hope this is working out okay. It's a little breezy, and also you'll probably hear the wind chimes over my shoulder and some birds. But I hope this tape's okay. This is the final Sunday school lesson in March as we go through Lent. There was a series of Sunday school lessons dealing with the Psalms and Lent. The next Sunday is Palm Sunday. The Sunday after that is Easter Sunday, of course. So this is our final one, and it comes from Psalms 130. And so hopefully my stuff here won't blow away. I've got everything to try to weight it down. So this is Psalm 130, and let me find it here. And let me read that in its entirety. It is labeled a psalm of ascent. This is Psalm 30. Out of the depths I have cried to you, O Lord. Lord, hear my voice. Let your ear be attentive to the voice of my supplication. If you, Lord, should mark iniquity, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you, that you may be feared. I wait for the Lord. My soul does wait, and in his word do I hope. My soul waits for the Lord, more than the watchman for the morning, indeed, more than the watchman for the morning. O Israel, hope in the Lord, for with the Lord there is loving kindness. With him there is abundant redemption. He will redeem Israel from all his iniquities. So this psalm starts out with this phrase, out of the depths. One of the things about the Psalms that I just love is that they are beautifully vague. In other words, they don't go into detail about what the depths are. And that means that you and I, when we struggle with that kind of darkness in our lives, difficult times, hard circumstances, we can identify with this psalmist. He says, out of the depths I cried to the Lord. Out of your depths, you can cry to the Lord. Out of my depths, I cry to the Lord. And so it's wonderfully vague so that we can sort of fill in the blanks. It's one of the reasons that the Psalms work, even when you translate them into different languages. Because Hebrew poetry doesn't rely on rhyming or rhythm. That doesn't work when you translate it. The Hebrew poetry is rooted in repeating ideas. And the beauty of the ideas expressed. So it doesn't matter what language you translate it into. In fact, this passage has a name. I didn't know this, and our Sunday school author says that this psalm is often called De Profundis, Latin for out of the depths. And he even, I got to looking at it, that made me curious. So I got to looking at it. Turns out there's lots of medieval music that is written setting this psalm to music with that title, De Profundis. And also there's a town in Ireland that has a stone that's erected. It has a cross carved on it, very ancient, and it is halfway between the town and the cemetery. And so even to this day, when they are after a funeral and they're processing to the cemetery, they stop at this stone, the De Profundis stone, and they recite this poem, this hymn, Psalm 130. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So out of the depths, whether we're grieving, suffering, right now we're really struggling with this coronavirus and this pandemic, lots of people are finding themselves in deep distress. And out of that distress, they can cry to the Lord. And then the psalm then says, let God hear my voice, for I know the Lord will hear me. Now then 3 and 4 deal with sin. And so some commentators have said that the depth that this psalmist is struggling with is probably something to do with a sin or some sort of bad decision that they made that had negative consequences for them. And that's possible. So it says, if you, Lord, should mark iniquity, O Lord, who could stand? But there is forgiveness with you that you may be feared. This idea that what if God marked our iniquity? Our Sunday school writer says that this word means basically to sort of keep an account. So you can imagine that God is like if God was the accountant and he was adding up all of our sins and all of our disobedience, we would be doomed because we could never pay that debt. We could never answer for all that. It reminded me from a scene from Shakespeare, The Merchant of Venice. Can you see it? Um, in The Merchant of Venice, there's a young man that makes sort of a bad business deal. And he takes a loan out from the Merchant of Venice, and he agrees to pay it back within a certain time. And if he's not able to pay it back, he says he'll pay for it with a pound of his own flesh. And sure enough, as the story goes, the man's ships are lost at sea, his fortune is lost, he can't repay the debt. And he's now being brought to trial by the Merchant of Venice to collect on his debt. Since he can't pay, he wants his pound of flesh. And he has an attorney that shows up to try to defend him. Now, we find out in the play it's actually his sweetheart in disguise, but let's not belabor that point. She gives this beautiful speech as the attorney about why he should be forgiven, and it has this line about mercy versus justice. He says, "Mercy is above the scepter's sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute of God himself. By this earthly power does show a likeness to God, when mercy seasons justice. Therefore, though justice be thy plea, consider that in the course of justice none of us would see salvation. We do pray for mercy, and that same prayer doth teach us what to render deeds of mercy." So, in other words, what Shakespeare is having this person say is, if we demand justice, all of us are guilty, and we are all hopeless without mercy. And so the psalmist is saying this very same thing, to say that if God were to count up our sins, we would all be doomed. Thankfully, in a couple of weeks when we celebrate Palm Sunday, Good Friday, and we think about Easter, Jesus steps in and pays for those sins, because if God were to add them up and mark them and keep an accounting, all of us would be doomed. He says in verse 4, "But with you there is forgiveness." Now then in verse 5 and 6, we have this extended imagery of waiting on the Lord. "I wait on the Lord, my soul does wait, and in his word do I hope." Man, that's good stuff, right? I wait on the Lord, and in his word I do hope. Wait and hope. We're right in the middle of all that, right? Us not knowing exactly what the future is going to hold, but being faithful to hope in God and willing to wait, be patient on God. And then he actually does this analogy of a watchman. He says, "More than the watchman, watch for the morning." And so again, you see this image of a guard who's got the graveyard shift. He's overnight. He's waiting and waiting and waiting for the morning. And I always thought of this, meaning that he just wants to get off for the, clock out. That his job is to watch. He has the overnight shift, and as soon as he sees daylight, he's like, yes, my shift is over, and someone else is going to step in. The commentator really brings out the point of thinking more in terms of when the city is under threat, and the fear is a night attack, that the watchman watches and waits, and sure enough, when the sun comes up, you just feel a sense of relief to say, we made it through the night. Think of how often. Also the idea of somebody who's waiting with a loved one who's very, very sick. And if you've been there and you've been by the bedside with a child that's got a terrible fever, and you wait through the night, and then when the sun comes up, you just feel like we made it through the night. We can do one more. We've made one more day. And so I think that's right. I think this idea of trying to get this sense of that our sin has brought us to a dark place. In the depths, we cry out to God. And in the midst of that, we know that God will see us through. And we just wait for the coming of dawn. We wait for the hope that comes with the morning. Now then, he ends this by saying, "O Israel." Now he extends it to other people. Not only do I cry out to God, but everybody cry out to God. He says, "For in the Lord there is loving kindness." Now, in my translation, the New American Standard translates this loving kindness. A lot of translations do. This is a very special word in Hebrew. It's chesed. I know, chesed. Did you hear that? So in Hebrew, this idea of chesed is a special kind of covenant love that really only God has. It's that you made a promise, and you will be faithful and good to that promise no matter what. And so the psalmist is saying that we can hope in the God. He has forgiveness, and in him there is this special chesed, the special loving kindness, that he will be good to his word. And then it says, and he will show abundant redemption. And another translation for that is that God has the power of redemption. That is, God is able to do it. You might feel really sorry for me if I did something wrong, and you might feel very sorry for me, but you really can't do anything about it. It might be a matter that you feel very badly about the punishment that's meted out to somebody, but you are powerless to do anything. But God, because of his chesed, because of his faithful love to us, has the power of redemption so that he can actually step in and make forgiveness happen. It is a mystery, actually. It really makes no sense how my sin can be covered by Jesus' death on the cross. It is a mystery. It is the power of God. But he has the power of redemption. And he can say so, and it is so. So, at any rate, that's our Sunday school lesson. I really got a lot out of this. I love this psalm. And I hope this week, at some point when you feel depressed and dark and sad and stressed and out of control, that you will cry out to God out of the depths and know that he hears us, that he has the power of redemption, and that we can hope in his word. So God bless you, and I will be broadcasting live on Sunday, 10:45. Hope you'll join me.